You know, this is stuff that we can take away and start using immediately, and that's what's exciting. You know, it's not theory, it's not what we've been preaching. You've got to make your stuff accessible. It's how to do that, the practical stuff. So we're really excited. Rob also regularly trains and presents at local, regional, and national conferences. So he is here from 1 to 3, or as long as it takes to get going on learning all of these tools. So I will turn it over to you.
All right, thanks. Hey, everybody.
Good morning.
That'll work. It's Friday. It's Friday is what it is. Friday afternoon after lunch. And at 2 hours, a couple of people's shoulders slouched when she said 2 hours. So I've been here a couple of times, and I thank you all for having me back. We're going to talk about some ways that you can actually test different kinds of digital stuff. So we'll first talk about website, which, you know, if you're out there creating a course and you're using the built-in stuff in the LMS, there are some things that you need to keep an eye on that hopefully the LMS supports. And I'm going to start actually by talking about and demonstrating a couple of websites that are really helpful in learning how to do this stuff, because they are the exact same site or the exact same page. It's just that one is intentionally not accessible and the other one is. So you can actually bounce between the two and learn more, far more than we're going to be able to cover today about what makes these things more accessible than less. And so we'll start with that, and then we'll move into a few things in the LMS. The testing tools that I'm going to show you will work with basically anything you can render in the browser. So you will be able to test some of the content if you're logged into the LMS as yourselves, if you're in student view, however you might be accessing it. The tools that I'm going to demonstrate, which are free, by the way, because I don't want to go in and ask people to then buy into something, because it's probably not going to happen. They will work across any platform for the most part. There are some limitations that I'll talk about, but for the most part, you're going to be able to test in just about anything. Then the last part of the day, we'll look at what we call non-web content, which is everything that doesn't render directly in a browser, everything that's not an HTML page. So your PDF content, your PowerPoint, we've got some example Google Docs to use, and there's actually an extension for Chrome that does a pretty good job testing accessibility. And so we'll go through testing on that front as well. As you might imagine, 2 hours isn't enough to get all of it, and I don't like to be an auctioneer and just try to get all the information into a relatively short amount of time. Instead, I want to stick to a few concepts and a few tools to get you all started. Does that make sense? Yeah. Instead of all the tools in 2 hours, because that's painful. I've been to talks like that before, and I just want people to stop and edit a little bit. So how many of you all are I know there's some familiar faces. You've heard me talk about accessibility, at least to some extent. How many of you all are brand new to accessibility, whether it's me talking about it or anyone else? Are you familiar at all? Because a little bit, kind of, sort of. So what I plan to do is to jump into the testing, but also discuss why we're testing for this stuff to begin with a little bit. Because I figured there would be some folks that are really new to it, and instead of diving into the deep end or starting in the kiddie pool, we'll kind of start in between to talk about some of the concepts as well. What browser do you all typically use? Let's ask that first. Chrome? Firefox or Chrome. I figured since you rely on the Google suite, you're probably using Chrome. And that's good. The tool that I rely on the most for web testing is called Wave, W-A-V-E. It is an extension for Chrome or an add-on for Firefox. There's a website as well that you can just type a URL into. The nice thing about the extension or the add-on is that you can run the same tests on a site that you have to log into. So the way the website works, the website is at wave.webaim.org. That's wave.webaim.org. And you can type or copy and paste a URL into that site, but it has to be publicly available. Wave.webaim, webaim, they're the folks who make it .org. And the limitation is that it has to be publicly available. So if you have to log into it, so I'm thinking about the LMS, you're not going to be able to send stuff out to that. But that's why I highly recommend that you grab the add-on or the extension for Firefox or Chrome, respectively. The cool thing about it is they all use the exact same testing. The algorithms that they run are exactly the same. In fact, the way that it gives you feedback on screen is virtually identical in these different environments. But again, the plugins or the add-ons that are actually in the browser give you a lot more flexibility. And basically at that point, anything you can bring up in your browser, you can test. What the tool does fundamentally is it runs through a whole series of algorithms, and it's looking around at the structure of the page. It's looking at some of the visual stuff, but it's also looking at what is actually delivered to the browser. And in some cases, it reports that to you so you can evaluate it. So for example, if you have an image, like we've got some images here, this is again a fake university, accessible university, and the caption for this image is AU student wins engineering award for talking robot sign language interpreter, and there's a picture here presumably of the robot. So you need some kind of a text equivalent for any kind of visual that you have in any kind of content, whether it's web or non-web. And that's so that folks who can't see the screen but use screen reading technology can still get the intended meaning of the image. And that little bit of information is usually tucked into an attribute called alt text. How many of you all are familiar with alt text in your course design? Kind of, sort of? The idea is that this little bit of text, and it's usually a couple of sentences, for a relatively simple image like this at least, should convey the intended meaning of the image. The nice thing about this tool is it shows you what that alt text is. It exposes that to you without having to dig around in the browser or look at the source of the page or anything like that. One of the other things that it exposes is the level of heading that a section or subsection heading has. You know, many of us might have learned to make headings just by making them larger and bold, but that doesn't have any structural meaning. So again, someone who's using a screen reader is not going to hear that this little bit of text content is a heading if it's just larger and bold-faced. So we need to have actual headings applied. So when you're in the LMS and you type a section or a subsection heading, you need to use the heading styles that are available in the LMS. That visibly changes the heading, but it also wraps that bit of text up into a tag so that that information is available for someone who uses a screen reader. You can do all of that stuff as well in Docs, in Word. You can add these heading styles, and little things like that are what tools like this help us to see without, again, having to dive into the web page or dive kind of behind the screen and start reading HTML, because really nobody wants to do that. I mean, I kind of do because I do a lot of assessment work, but I'm guessing that y'all probably don't want to just dive in and start deconstructing pages. If you do, that's another talk, and I'd love to do it sometime. But we'll stay with what this little tool reports for the most part. So visibly, there's a lot of stuff that we'll look for as well. I don't want to de-emphasize the important visible elements. And I've preached this before to some of you here or in a different setting, but color contrast is one of the things that when I do assessments, I note as an accessibility fail the most often, and that's contrast between text and a background. Everyone in the room has been in a presentation space where you've been looking at slides on a screen and you have not been able to read the slide content simply because it's pick whatever that color combination was, right? If you happen to be colorblind, there are implications about using color to convey meaning. You used to see on forums, well, actually, we'll get into that because I'm going to pick on this web page because that's its job. The job of this web page is to let us pick on it. So it's not only about the information that's behind the screen, it's also visible stuff. So we'll talk about that as we talk about testing. For the most part, I'm going to stick with a handful plus a couple of concepts to test for, as opposed to, again, doing a really deep dive. That means we're actually going to ignore a lot of what the tool reports out to us. We're just not going to worry about it for this afternoon because that involves specifications and understanding interactions that we don't need to get into. We want to get a good fundamental start to testing this stuff so that you all know with your own content, even as you're developing it, how it is as far as accessibility. So when you install the Wave tool into the browser, it's difficult to see because it's a tiny little icon, but it's a little wavy W that goes into your toolbar, right adjacent to the address bar. And the nice thing about it is that with the click of that button, it runs all of its tests. So you can see that the screen actually changed. The left-hand side of the screen is the report. And this tells us the results of all of the algorithms that it sent the page through. In this short amount of time, it sent this individual page and different elements through 40 or 50 different checks to run these checks up against international web accessibility standards. I think that's another important thing. The folks at WebAIM didn't just make this up. They wrote the algorithms, but they wrote these tests against international web accessibility standards. So we're not just kind of living in a world with accessibility where we get to make up the rules. We know what the rules are, and this tool helps to see if we're following them or not. So there are a couple of things. Well, what jumps out at y'all? Yeah, red always jumps out, right?
Upside down bucket.
There you, I like upside down bucket.
Trying to tell us that the picture is wrong with the picture. Maybe it doesn't have any alt text.
Yeah, and so the little red icons, and really all the icons have meaning, whether they are a fail like the red ones, or we've got some that are for notification as well. But one of the reasons that I really like Wave is because it's a good teaching tool in and of itself. So I can click on at the very top, and the text is very small, so I'll read it. It says the following apply to the entire page. So it differentiates the things that it's checked here from individual items within the page that it's reported down in the content. And we've got two little boxes. One has a little dialogue window, like a little speech bubble. If I click on that, I get this flyout that tells me what the error actually is. And in this case, it's document language is missing. Every page, whether it is web or not, should have its primary language specified. When a screen reader hits a page, it'll get into the page header and it'll start to collect some of this data. And one of the data points it looks for is what language is this thing written in? Because the screen reader is smart enough to know that if it is in English, I'm going to read it as would an English speaker. And you can actually get variations in the region. So you can get UK English, US English, just like when you go and if they have a currency converter somewhere or a language converter, you will see variations of English because it's going to use slightly different pronunciation potentially. It gets really important if you have a page that's in another language, because let's say that there's not a language declaration made, but the page is mostly in Spanish. If the screen reader is set up to read English, it's going to read it like me reading Spanish, and I don't know Spanish. It's going to read it with English pronunciation, but Spanish spelling. So it's going to be very difficult to understand. The good thing when you look at an LMS platform, that kind of thing should be taken care of for you at the platform level. It's not anything that you will typically have to worry about unless you have, say you're putting together OER. I noticed that one of your next trainings is OER. If you happen to have passages that are in another language, you do need to make sure that you put a language declaration around those passages. So you can get really specific with this whole language thing to where it's applied for the page, but then you can also apply it to different parts as well. Sorry, I should spell out my acronyms. It's one of the next. It is one of the next trainings, right? Did I make that up?
Yeah, correct.
Oh, it's right there.
Yeah,
Stay
right
wide
there.
open as you look at that. Perfect timing. It's on Friday, April 20th at 1 p.m.
Thank you, Rob.
Well, you're welcome. But what this says is this declaration isn't there on this page. It's looking at the HTML. There's one little line that is no more than a few characters to declare the language. This is a big problem that may or may not be easy to fix, honestly. The good thing is if you are in like Office, and I know you said you are using a lot of docs, but if you still use Office, that gets set when you install Microsoft Office, and it goes across all the apps so that that language will be declared. You will see PDF documents that don't have this declared. And when we talk about PDF, I'll show you that it also tests and it'll report out this same thing. So the other little error that we have, I'll remind myself because I don't remember, there is no heading structure in this page. So if you would look visibly, the nice thing about this tool, or one of the nice things about it, if you click on the W again, it all goes away and we go back to the page. But I'm going to move through here, and visibly, do you think there are headings for different sections of the page?
So looking at welcome, you would think that would be it.
Welcome seems to be, I would argue that we have headings. We have headings that are likely just visibly headings. Even apply now, I think, is a section heading. So what that tells us is that there are no headings defined in the HTML. Each one of those headings, like I mentioned before, should be wrapped up in a heading tag. And it's a relatively simple thing in HTML, and this is where the styles come in. This tells me there is no heading structure. So each one of those little snippets of text is just a snippet of text. It's just like any other text on the screen for someone who's using a screen reader. So we know that that's a pretty big fail. And it's just reported as a warning because the automatic tool isn't smart enough to know for sure that, yes, this page does have logical headings. It doesn't go so far as to say, that's a heading, it needs to be marked up that way, but it flags it for us to go in and double check. So there are some things that still require some manual interpretation, no matter what the tool spits out. And in general, not to disappoint everybody, in general, automated tools are only going to reliably catch about 40% of the accessibility barriers that might be in a page. So we'll go over some of the manual checks here in a little bit as well. So we still have more errors. I'm not going to go through each one, but you get the idea of, I hope you get the idea of how instructional this tool in and of itself is. The other thing that I'll point out, this says missing alternative text. It actually highlights the image that doesn't have that alternative text set. This one is pretty straightforward because the text in it just says accessible university. That same text that is embedded in the image needs to be available in the alternative text, but it isn't. And this just says, hey, there's no alternative text defined here. In most LMS platforms, including yours, you can add alt text to images. I don't remember, is it done in the media library or do you add with each instance? Do you remember?
When I've done it, it's just each instance.
Okay.
Yeah. Every time I upload a picture, there's a space to put the alternate text.
Yeah. In there. Okay. So if you skip that step, you're going to get this little error on each image that doesn't have alternative text. And for images that have text, it's a pretty easy thing to do. Like I said, generally you can just type the text that's in the image in there. Otherwise, you want to try to convey the intended meaning of the image. Any of you all teach in STEM? You probably have some elements that are a little bit, well, picture's worth 1,000 words, right? There may be more complex images. Come to our conference in June. We're going to have somebody talk about alt text for an hour, and we can get more into how to write alt text for complex images, because those are generally not going to be where this actually looks. For most of the rest of us, our content's pretty straightforward. Generally speaking, I'm not trying to insult anyone. If you're sitting there going, well, no, I have really complex images too, then I apologize. But I know in my work, most of the time, a couple of sentences will do it. And you type it into that alternative text field, and you will remove this error. You can see we've got that little box repeated here. So we have missing alternative text on this arrow image. The arrow is really important because it's actually a control. In this case, it lets someone move to the next slide. This is a slide deck. So if I click on it, then I move from one slide to the next, or I move to the previous ones. If there isn't an alternative text attribute that tells somebody what happens, then they have no idea, right? They don't know what action might actually occur when they click on that image. And in this case, there is a call to action to move to the next slide. So it's important whether it is a static image, a linked image, the alternative text needs to tell somebody where they're going. So just like, and we'll talk about link text here in a little bit, you want to have your link text tell someone where in the world they're going, as opposed to just having the URL out there. And it's a similar thing with linked images that you have on a site. I'll show you, well, here's another example. And this is the other piece about this tool that I like is when there is alternative text, it will report it out to you. So here we've got these three little visible dividers between the sections, and they're really only there to serve as visible dividers. They convey no meaning whatsoever. But the designer has given them alternative text that says horizontal line graphic. It just creates overhead for somebody using a screen reader. There is no visible meaning behind these. They are purely there for those of us who can see to have a little bit more of a delineation between the sections, right? So in a case like this, it's great that it reports the alternative text out to you, because you can go, that doesn't need to be there. Those just need to be flagged as decorative, which remind me, this shows you just how much I played in the LMS, because I started looking at Google Docs instead. Can you flag an image as decorative? Is there a checkbox for a decorative image?
I'm thinking other LMSs you can say this is decorative, but in Moodle you can't. There's
Okay.
not a checkbox for that.
Okay. Because what that does is it basically creates what we talk about as null alternative text, which will hide it from screen readers. A screen reader won't announce an image with null alternative text or with that little checkbox. If your LMS can't do it, then it's up to you. You could go into the HTML and edit that, or just leave the alt text blank. And we might try to see if we can find a page with an image on it and see if the alt text, yeah, we might kind of do some live testing and see what happens with an image that you just don't put alt text into, because I don't know how it treats it. Sometimes if you just don't put alt text in, it'll go ahead and make it skippable. It'll go ahead and hide it. So again, with this, even if there is alternative text, you need to check and make sure that it does what it's supposed to do. So if there is descriptive alternative text, this is where the manual piece comes in again. You want to make sure that it's not like a file name. Because a file name is going to be pretty useless for someone to hear. It's not the intended meaning of 99.9% of images out there, but it is often what ends up in that alternative text. So when you see it reported out, you want to evaluate what that meaning actually is. Does that make sense? Enough? Not the most confident head. I know we're kind of jumping in halfway, but the other piece of this that stands out is there is a data table down here at the bottom. And it is actually a data table. We have data points about percentage of male and female enrollment over a couple of years of periods in different degrees of study in our fake university. This convenient little icon here, if I click on that, it tells me that it thinks that this is a layout table. Anyone know the difference between layout and data table? Layout table is something that you'll use most often anymore in Word or in maybe even in Google Docs, but it's just there to give content a place. It's just a placeholder. It holds it in the order that you want it in. Whereas a data table actually has tabular data. So in this case, it's enrollment trends. You can think of a million different data tables that actually do convey data or do hold data in them. You have table headers, and it's a lot more meaningful maybe than a layout table. Half the time, if not more, the borders of a layout table aren't even visible, because it really is just a way to keep content on the screen in a certain place. The problem with this being reported as a layout table is that it actually is a data table, and data tables need some kind of specific stuff. And I've got an example that we can look at in Moodle here in a couple of minutes. But whereas visibly, again, this table has the headers bolded, so the year range is in a bold font, and each one of the degrees of study is bolded. The total is bolded as well. Percent male and percent female, all of those are headers, the ones that run across the top. So when we get into 2007 and 2008 and all of the areas of study, these are headers for the rows or for the columns that come under them, right? And then these on the left-hand side are headers for each one of these rows. The problem is that while we can tell that visibly, none of that information is built into the table behind the screen in this case. So what will happen is a screen reader will hit this, and it'll just read all the content left to right, top to bottom. So it'll read the top row, it'll read the next row after that. And once it gets into the data, someone using a screen reader will lose track of what headers apply to a particular cell as they go through it. There's HTML markup that needs to come with tables. And that's, I want to dig in a little bit and see what Moodle lets you do to create these tables. Because I tested one earlier that didn't have the right stuff. But it's a matter of will the authoring environment let you do it? So we'll answer that question here in a bit. There's some form fields here as well. Do you all work with form fields? Do you do surveys outside of Moodle? Because really within Moodle, you're kind of stuck with however it sends stuff out.
With Google Forms.
Okay. Google Forms generally is pretty good with accessibility. We might look at an example later on and see. But for the most part, and it's not showing me. For the most part, it's up to the authoring environment, unless we talk about PDF stuff.
And then there's student evaluations through SmartEvals.
SmartEvals is a third-party app.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then Laserfish, they're all custom. Yeah, there are other ones, but they're all third party.
Okay. And that's one of the challenges that everybody faces who has an obligation for making sure digital is accessible, is that that obligation still stands even with third-party stuff that we use. So we might pull one up and see what it looks like if you want to. I don't know. People are never sure if they actually want to see something tested or not. Right, exactly. Because then there are like 15 people who know that, and everyone has to decide what to do with that knowledge. So we can come back to that. But in general, what this will do, oh, I hit the wrong thing. When you run this little tool, it looks to see if the label, so down here on these checkboxes, you can see the icon. It looks to see if the visible label is married to the field. And in this case, it's a checkbox, because behind the screen, those need to be connected to each other. How and why may not be as important. You know, the important thing to know is that if you run this test on a survey and it fires this back at you, there's probably a problem. And that problem is as far as how it's how it manifests for someone trying to use this thing. If they're using that screen reading technology, it's not going to read the label. They're just going to hear that it's a checkbox. They'll hear whether it's checked or not. But they won't have any idea what the label is on screen in a situation like this. So this tool is my canary in the coal mine. I run this on a page, and then I decide if I need to go fill up my water bottle and get a snack, because I'm going to be sitting there doing a lot of manual testing, because I get 25 or 30 errors on one small page. Or if I get a handful, then I think, okay, it's probably not awful, depending on some other things that it reports. But again, it exposes so much of this stuff, because the alternative to being able to see this is to go in almost element by element and right click on it, go for, I think Norman schools are, I don't know if they're saying they're going to be closed next week. They keep calling me. My oldest kid is so ready to go back to school. Yeah, it's stressful. It's messing up his routine. He doesn't like it. But son. But the alternative in the browsers, you can go in and inspect these elements one by one. Have any of you all ever done this on a web page? This is what you get. You actually get what is delivered to the browser. And well, what's interpreted by the browser. It's not even what comes from the server. It's what the server, or it's what the browser interprets from the server and spits out to the page. You're kind of in the matrix when you're looking at this view, which can be really helpful unless you have no idea what you're looking at. You know, if you can't see the matrix, then this is just like in the matrix where it's just zeros and ones, but you still think there's a spoon, right? Anyone? A spoon?
Yeah, I get it.
Thank you.
I get it.
So what this shows, to interpret a little bit, is it says, hey, there's an image, because I'm looking at the Accessible University image, and it tells me where it comes from. Not helpful. You know, that doesn't really matter. And it shows, you know, if you recall, it said that there's no alternative text. There should be alt equals open quote, in this case, Accessible University, close quote, somewhere in this line. So instead of digging through this way, if you use Wave, it looks at this and presents the information to you in a way that's a lot easier to consume and understand. But that's how you dig around under the hood of a website if you really want to.
If you find an error like that, do you have to then, how do you fix it?
Yeah, it will depend on the environment that you're in. So if you are working on your own course stuff, let's say that it's a table issue, then ideally you can go in and fix the table. And that's one of the things I do want to get into a little bit later on, is to look at this table that I saw in the test course and see what the tool lets you do. In some cases, like for me, I do a fair amount of testing, and it's almost always a situation where I write up a report with some notes about suggested fixes and give that to somebody. It might be a vendor that's working on a product for a state agency. It might be a web designer in a higher ed institution. It just depends. But a lot of the time, you know, a lot of the stuff that we have as part of our coursework isn't really ours. So it could be, let's say, for example, you decide that, you know, you're looking at or you're referring to some third-party stuff as a part of your class. So maybe there are some videos or some articles that are out there that you link students to. In this case, you could run this over it and do the same kind of thing. You know, get in touch with whoever owns that and say, I noticed a couple of issues. Have you thought about accessibility in your content? And from there, you can reach out to folks on campus who can in turn reach out to me if you want to manage that conversation downstream a little bit. Because the answer to that question that I get the most often is no, I have no idea what you're talking about. Or it's yeah, it works really well even if you don't have high-speed internet. It's still accessible in rural areas. I'm like, that is one form of accessibility, which is very important. However, it's not really what we're talking about here. So it kind of depends on it almost completely depends on the context. For your own stuff, it's probably more useful because then you can take it and go, oh, I know I need to go in and apply those heading styles, for example. So the next thing, one more feature that I like about this. I mentioned color. And if you can see what you want, so I'll just tell you because it's very tiny print. Up in the upper left-hand side, there is a label that says contrast. And when I click on that, it runs a test for color contrast on text against the background color behind it. The nice thing about this is that it isn't just a matter of like a rule of thumb to determine what contrasts enough or does not. There is actually, again, an algorithm that determines color contrast ratio. And this is what this tool uses. It runs the colors through this algorithm and it comes up with this ratio. And it shows me here that these labels on the top navigation are pretty low. So I can come over here and click on either in the report. Usually I can click right next to it. And we see the error is very low contrast. Click on it in the report and it actually tells me what the value of the color is. The hexadecimal value, which for design people is important. It gives you the hexadecimal value of the color and it shows you the contrast ratio. Here it's 2.53 to 1. So what we're looking at is in the text, whoops, too much. In the text in these drop downs, when the mouse is not running over them, you can tell that that's kind of hard to read. You know, you can imagine having a device outside, even on a cloudy day, it's probably going to wash that out. And yes.
Is there a number that's a good contrast ratio to shoot?
I'm so glad. It's like I planted you. Yes, there is.
I'm just curious.
No, you're exactly. It's a really, really good question. For regular text, the ratio needs to be 4.5 to 1 or higher. So it's not to say, and please don't leave saying this guy Rob said we have to always use black and white, because that's not true. But you do need to aim for that 4.5 to 1 ratio. And so what this does is it calculates the ratio and shows you, and what you're looking for, if you run this or any other contrast checker, they're almost always going to have these little letters after them, AA and AAA. Long story short, pay attention to the AA. Those are different levels of standards, and we in the public sector and the private sector look to the AA standards. So I'm going to show you another tool later on that you can use on your PDFs and stuff, and it's going to show you the same kind of thing. Look for pass or fail when you're looking at the AA, or think about pass or fail in the context of the AA. It gets more fun than that. If you have large text, quote unquote, you can get away with 3 to 1 on your contrast ratio. So it doesn't have to be quite as high of a level of contrast. Large text is defined in points, which we don't really use, right? We use pixels and we use different measures of fonts. But when we look at points, large text is, I think it's 14 point bold or 18, I believe, is what you'll see in the supporting guidance in the standards. So yeah, there is a defined ratio that we try to hit. And color, like I said, it's one of the things that I note the most frequently doing accessibility evaluations of any kind of content. Color contrast fails. Okay, questions, comments, concerns?
So if you scroll down where it says the robot,
Yeah.
if you're not a robot or whatever, I always wanted to know what the screen reader says on that.
Okay.
Yeah, that one.
So on the security test over here.
Yeah, so does it read, so it's, I heard you say that we need to make a heading for that little box, so it says something that, how is that handled?
It depends on the version of security test that's on the page. Most of them are now, it's called Recaptcha. It's the little thing where there's a checkbox that says, I'm not a robot. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
And theoretically, I don't know what algorithms they're using to figure out if you're a robot based on checking a box. But there are algorithms there that theoretically you can check on the box and it will recognize you didn't answer super, super fast, like within a millisecond. So we think you're probably not a robot. That's relatively accessible. The problem is if it does think you're a robot, it almost always gives you a series of images and it'll say which images have part of a sign in them. And there'll be 9 images or so. And there are a lot of challenges with that because because of security, they don't put traditional alternative text in for those images. And there's almost always an audio version of it as well, but it can be, for security reasons, really, really hard to understand. Mm-hmm. So CAPTCHA, which is the one that existed before the I'm a robot checkbox, and Recaptcha are really big challenges for accessibility. Mm-hmm. I say all that to say that what they have done here is a little bit different because this is just a question. So, and this one doesn't have everything that it needs to be in order to be accessible. When we look at the more accessible one, you'll see an actually more accessible version, but this isn't relying on as much robot smarts as CAPTCHA and Recaptcha do. It's really a lot more common in my experience to see CAPTCHA or Recaptcha on pages as opposed to something that someone has just sat down and typed in a really simple little question. Like, I can't remember where, I'm trying to think of what form I was filling out. It might've been for a conference registration, but they just said, enter the answer to this math problem. And it was 4 + 1. And that was it. So still not perfect because people with some cognitive disabilities are still really bright. But may not be able to put the logic together to fill that out. So you can always knock it for some reason, but in terms of more general accessibility, stuff like that's better, which is why they have gone even here with this model.
So that's just important to us, I guess. I'm wondering when we go to vendors or when we look at programs, that's just something we could look at and say, oh, that might not be accessible. We wouldn't want to go with that.
Yeah,
and to make sure that that's been addressed.
Right.
Got it.
And remember, when you are in a procurement and you're looking at different vendor products, you're looking for the most accessible that fits the need, right? That's the guidance that we have. And I say that simply because if you rule out CAPTCHA or Recaptcha in tools, you're probably going to rule out a lot of tools. But it's still good to point out to a vendor and have a conversation about, are there better ways? Because there are some hidden things that website vendors can do that don't require any interaction by humans at all. And they're tucked away so that no one can see them, but a bot can get in and interact. And that's what triggers that, hey, this is a bot trying to fill out this form. So I think it's a good thing to bring up. And I'm not going to say don't advocate, but the reality of the marketplace is that stuff is everywhere. In fact, I think all the state of Oklahoma forms, if they go through kind of the most common form building product, they have a CAPTCHA on them. And we actually stopped using it because we were like, we don't really like the CAPTCHA. And we're not getting a whole bunch of spam in the forms that we put out. I don't think. I should ask our marketing coordinator before I say that. But yeah, we did decide we're not going to do that. We'll do something different. Other questions? Fair. Okay. The next test. How many of you all use your keyboard instead of your mouse to move around the web, fill out forms, anything like that?
Sometimes I'll tab around with it. It's a pretty good accessibility test. You can test for a lot of stuff just by tabbing around a page. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to start hitting the tab key. I am going to zoom in a little bit, and I just want you all to tell me. Let's see. Just tell me where I am. So what should happen as I tab through is I should go through the page, basically from left to right, top to bottom, regular reading order.
and I should land on anything I can interact with. So navigation elements, links, form fields, anything like that. And I should be able to interact with it. But my first test is just to see if I can actually get to the stuff and to see if I can tell where the heck I am. So you all tell me as I go. I'm going to hit the tab key, tab, tab, tab.
I don't even know where you're at.
Tab, 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 tab. Oh, hey, look, I went somewhere.
Somewhere, yeah.
Tab, 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 tab. Tab, tab. Oh, this is disappointing.
Explain the question again. I didn't follow the question.
Sure. So I'm just navigating using my keyboard. I'm not using a mouse or a trackpad. And the common interactions involve using, well, the most common is to use the tab key. When you hit the tab key, it should move you between all of the elements you can interact with on a page. So it should hit the navigation elements at the top. It should hit the links in the page. It should hit form fields. And as I'm doing this, I know that that stuff needs to be visible when I land on it. So if there's a link and I hit the tab key and I land on it, that should be visible somehow. A lot of the time you'll have a little dashed line, or in Chrome, I think it's a little blue box that goes around those elements when you tab onto them. So that's what I'm looking for as I move through the page. Does that make more sense? Does that clarify? Okay, thank you, good question. So can you tell where I am now? Yeah, I'm over in the form, and you can tell it's because there's a little blinking cursor. So it's kind of hard to break that. I've seen it happen, but it's kind of hard to break being able to see that I'm in a form. However, there's a lot of stuff that I skipped right over. What should I have hit? What jumps out almost immediately that I should have landed on? I should have hit the navigation, right?
Yeah.
I think I did. I just couldn't tell that I was on it. So that's the accessibility fail. Because every interactive element should be visible. And the phrase that we use to talk about this is tab focus or keyboard focus. Whenever I land on an element, I should be able to see that I'm on it. Did you have a question?
Yeah, this is a question that I need clarified, and it's important for all of us. So in an email for a blind student, when we send that out, we often put a link to a web page or something where we want them to go. And I heard that that's a problem area. Like sometimes we type click here, but they don't know where to click. Or sometimes in my head, I'm thinking that it's reading the email message and then it gets to that URL and it just reads all the letters and the numbers. And so could you just make sure that we all know how to properly make that accessible? Because it's kind of the same thing you're saying here.
It's along the same lines, sure. And well, yeah, I'm not jumping ahead a whole lot. I'm not giving anything away talking about it now.
Oh.
The important thing about that, and you described the problem really well. There's an additional piece that factors in that a lot of folks aren't aware of. So I've mentioned the screen reading technology, and this is software that sits on someone's machine and it reads the text on the screen, but it reads these things that are back behind the screen, the heading, the alternative text, stuff like that. So that if someone can't see the screen, they can still perceive the information. They're getting it into their brains, just not visually, right? So the screen reader can do some stuff that we might take for granted that we do visibly. If you think about what you just described in a web page, for example, and again, these links stink, you can't really see them, but there are actually two links down here. One says click here, well, they both say click here. So yeah, you're right, there are three. The problem with that, as you alluded to, is that they all say the same thing. The screen readers the screen reader user can ask the reader to list all of the links on a page, and they just put them into a list. So what are they going to hear in a situation like this with these?
Click here, click here, click
Right.
here.
Now, here's the funny thing about web standards. I don't do a lot of teaching to like legal interpretation of web standards, because with something like this, you could, I think, make a successful argument that this meets the letter of the standards. The standards say that link text, which is what in this case is just click here, repeated 3 times, needs to make sense in context. So you can make a case that this says there are these issues to see a list, click here. To see a more accessible version, click here. For a cheat sheet, click here. I think you could probably make a case that this is okay by standards. I think if you tested this up against the more accessible version, just with students who can see, can't see, whatever, they're going to want the more accessible one. Because the text in that case is actually descriptive. I'll jump in to that page real quick. And now, number one, they're underlined, right? You can actually see them in the content. Whereas before, they were basically the same color font. You couldn't even tell they were links. So now it says list of issues, inaccessible version, and cheat sheet of accessibility issues. So all they did was basically keep the content in that sentence. And instead of saying, to see this, click here, they just moved the active link into text that was basically already there.
How did they know to click that?
On which
it says list of issues, and so I'm hearing you say that it's just going to be reading list of issues. And
it reads those all in the context though of links. If it reads a list of links, and the reader recognizes a link. So when the reader hits a link, it will say visited link or link, because it knows if you have actually followed the link, because the browser actually remembers if you have followed a link before or not. And the reader, when it gets to an HTML link, it will announce that it's a link. So that part we get for free, basically. But where we do have the influence is in what does the text of that link actually say. So that's the important part for those of us who create content.
What I'm hearing you say is that my blind student's going to read along, and it's going to read, and it's going to be understandable, and then it's going to say link, list of issues.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's important.
And then the other one, it would just say link,
click here. Right.
Oh,
yeah.
It would say link.
It would still say link because that's still a link. It's just the link text is incredibly generic.
Non-descriptive.
Yeah.
But if in the sentence prior, sorry, I'm just making a pain. If the link text just said, or if the sentence said for the list of issues, click here, they've just heard that, right?
Yeah, but remember too. Yeah, but remember too that the reader can do kind of like we do when we skim a page. We might our eyes will clue into the links, and that kind of helps set a context for the page. The screen reader tries to equivocate that somewhat by allowing somebody to have a list of links read off. That's where you lose the context. Because it literally just goes in that case, and it will read out whatever link text is defined. So it would just say link, click here, link, click here, link, click here, when someone has those links read off. Because then it just reads the link text.
Is that something separate that how do you get to the list of links?
There's a keyboard shortcut that you use to have that, to spit that stuff out. Typically, yeah. Typically, yeah.
Okay. So,
and if not, then there's
page. They say, "Give me screen links."
Yeah, it could be at the beginning. I mean, and it's an interesting exercise to ask people this. But what do you look at the first time you look at a web page?
Images.
What after that? Images.
Structure, just the main headings.
Headings.
Whatever's underlined.
Anything I have.
The links. Right. And so what a screen reader will allow somebody to do is to hear a lot of that information in as similar of a way as is possible with the technology to the way that we read it when we can see the screen. So you mentioned headings, right? Screen reader somebody can ask the reader to report all the headings on a page. And as long as they are marked up as headings, they'll be announced. So just like we might visibly skim for headings, the user of a screen reader can hear that stuff audibly. Same thing with the links. I'm trying to think of what else you can kind of aggregate out. Those are the two that are probably the most common. But the idea is the same. It's kind of building a mental map of the page. And the links tend to help because it puts the page in context a little bit, right? Even if they're third-party links, kind of gives you an idea then of where this content fits in, even before you start to read through it. So the idea is that someone, whether they can see the screen or not, again, can perceive that information regardless of how they're getting it into their heads. Like I said, by letter of the standards, I think you can get away with click here over and over again. But I think that it's much more usable, generally speaking, to have a little bit more description in your links.
So it shouldn't say, I'm sorry, I'm just thinking of like when we do surveys, should we say find survey below or survey?
Click here to take survey. Or find survey here. Whatever, something like that. Just that lets them know that there's an action and what to expect happens when they follow the link. And like I said, a lot of the times it'll save real estate, because what I see people do a lot of the time is basically type to see the original issue. So this sentence part of the way through says, to see the original issues, consult the inaccessible version. And then after that, we'll say by clicking here, and that'll be the active link text. So a lot of the time when I recommend changing the content or changing the link text, I just say remove that by clicking here and embed that link behind the inaccessible version text. And this is something you have to check manually too with link text. There's not a way other than manually visibly reading through or using a screen reader to have it announced if you do use screen readers for testing, which I'm not going to get to that today. We're not going to talk about that. But it takes manual intervention to check for this. And this was one of the things, it's like I said, you just bump this into a different part of the talk, but this is an important part of testing. There's a tricky part with this with documents, PDFs, things like that. What can you think? What's a challenge with this approach in a PDF? What if it's printed? If there's no website address here?
Yeah, then they don't.
Oh.
So if they interact with it digitally, you still want to have the active link text be like this. You want it to be descriptive.
Yeah.
My recommendation is to make a note, like a parenthetical note, or if you're doing PowerPoint slides, I'll put a website with the active link in one bullet, and I'll just nest the next bullet with the URL. And I'll usually use a website address shortener like Bitly, or Google has one where you can take a ridiculously long website address and get it cut down to about that. So you're not wasting a whole bunch of space in your documents. But when it comes to things that are destined to be printed out, and I know you can print web pages, but that's kind of a corner case. The typical case with Word, PDF, even PowerPoints, you're liable to end up with those printed out at some point. So it's a good idea to have the website address there visible so that someone can sit there and look at it and type it into their computer. So there's my spiel on link text.
Why didn't you say you used, what's your, URL.com?
Yeah, which I mean,
It's just as good as Bitly.
yeah, I think so. I haven't used it. I don't know why it wouldn't be. I know that the interfaces for some of them are not that accessible, but they all do the same thing, and they spit out a much shorter website address. I think AbleTech has a Bitly account, so that's why we use it, because we can customize them a little bit. Oh yes, quite upscale. We hold our pinkies up when we do that, just for effect. What do we take 5? We're halfway through. It's after lunch.
Please grab it.
Let's take 5.
I'm not taking those home.
Oh,
Yeah, please.
I'm running it over our website, so that's interesting.
I'm sorry, how are you?
The website
Yeah.
running wave over that.
Thank you.
So this is good.
Good.
It's once you create it the first time, of course. When you add it, you do it as you add it.
How are you doing? And they're all,
It's overwhelming.
It's a little bit at a time. I think I just heard you say you do it kind of as you go in.
Yeah, well, once you create the original,
Yeah.
and as you update and add, and you can tweak each semester, then you
Little bit at a time.
go. But otherwise, doing it initially, it's like anything. Total redo, total thing.
I mean, the way that I advise folks is very much along the lines of your topic. So start with new stuff, create it, use the same exact structure,
What you're talking about is
Somebody do it.
So far, a lot of what I'm talking about is like screen reader access. Yeah, I'm going to talk about some more of the visible sides here in just a minute. The contrast and visible design.
Is there a way for a person to test a screen reader? I mean, I don't have that disability, so.
Right.
Is there a way for me to test it? Because that would just me really
Yeah.
see what's happening.
There is. Are you on an Apple device by any chance? Okay. on the DC side, there is a freely available but community-supported screen reader. Please ask for a donation. It's in PDA. And it's like a community-supported screen reader. I tested it more than like JAWS, which is Disability Services offers students here. But it's more expensive.
If we were interested.
So what she said, she said, she said, get started
They have installed it. I just had a conversation with somebody yesterday about jobs. I don't know how it's instruction like anymore. I don't know if they have like a enterprise license where you pay for say 50
Yeah.
credits now per machine. I really don't know what that's like. But I use an EDA all the time because it is part of it is green. And I'll just use it because I know what to do and step out over that. And it's a good product. But yeah, I think it is helpful to hear what the readers.
About a month or so ago, I joined the DSCG.
I think I get ESS, I'm not sure what
AG. It's it's through emails. It's anybody that's in disability services that has a question. They have all these people on explanation signed up to it, and they answer each other and tell each other what they use, and they talk about all these different things. I've been watching it. It's on
And I haven't even talked to them. I'm really going to get into speech recognition. So we use Dragon, naturally speaking. There's all kinds of stuff that you'll find is broken online. Because Dragon's looking for some stuff that the screen readers are concerned about, or that somebody can't see but that's like we're actually trying to hire somebody to work with me. That's a lot involved.
I watched a webinar about an hour ago, and they used to use the card down the bottom, and I could see a couple of mistakes as we go through our mistakes as he was talking. She was talking so fast, and so that was an exposure to Carr.
We do cards on our webinars, whether anybody requests or not. We do card sets up. She just sets it in front of the room. She has her set up in a separate screen. I've seen it better integrated before. Like I had somebody once give me a USB thing, plug into my machine, and just put the card right below the slide.
Yeah, that's where this was.
That's an in-person conference over the one that's in public crossing. What we did with just.
Who this was? The University. I forgot. I'd have to go back on my computer and look at it.
It's difficult.
It's a national.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
It was interesting too. He was given the latest stats on employment.
Oh,
Disability services. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
I saw it in the today. I usually just wait and go to the
I went.
website and read.
It was really good.
Yeah, they do a lot of really interesting work.
It's almost
I don't know. I know whenever they do, they have big disability committee, and webinar series. But I think it's whenever the labor report comes out. So
Yeah. They just had the March one.
Yeah.
And we're ticking up. We're 2008 was. Right before the
Right, yeah.
Great Recession. And then it's full employment and disability.
What I've heard economists say is that they think that the labor pool of people with disabilities is pretty good. So a lot of employers are beginning to do more.
And that's why they say that there's a slight, there's a couple percent, 2% faster rate for disability increase than it is for everybody otherwise, but it's still at like 73 years and change.
There's still probably like 30 or 40 points. Yeah.
Well, I was talking about overall.
Yeah.
I can't remember what the.
Yeah.
Makes more sense if you know HTML. Okay.
Yeah, right now, but it'll.
This is the day
So
after.
if you will, okay,
This will be the one.
good.
Those will help you.
January,
Yes,
she was born.
So when you create choose the web page option, you create a little web page.
And I'm not even.
On heading, you can set text with the heading.
Have I'm on the next step. She's already signed up.
Yeah, I've never used, I've always just used it.
Yeah,
What's-
making my way.
What school does your child go to?
But it's actually, they
Jackson.
just, the screen readers are actually.
My wife taught at Eisenhower for several years.
Okay.
Back in my doctoral years at OU,
That's what the.
she was the primary director.
Yeah. Yeah. My wife and I both grew up in Norman, and we did the boomerang thing. We left for a little while, and then we
Yeah.
made our way back.
My wife's an OU,
Yeah.
pretty much. Born in Alaska, but raised in Texas and Oklahoma.
Yeah.
I'm a New Yorker, born and raised in New York City. And when I was 20, I came here to go to SMU,
Yeah.
BNC. by the way. That was the first time in my life I've been west of New Jersey. And by the time I got to Ohio, I knew I wasn't going back. Whole different world than I ever knew before.
Yep.
Okay, so how will I go in?
All right, let's we'll get going again on some other web stuff. We'll take a look at that page with a table because I'm kind of curious from the authoring side what y'all can do. It's another minute or so.
Okay, more tools, extensions.
Okay.
And wait, okay, next.
Can you show them where to get that extension, that wave extension, just so
Yep.
everybody.
When you get back, we're asking.
And I'll send out the link too on Monday to get it too as well.
A descriptive.
We get over
line
30, I'm
link.
out of here.
Yeah.
That must be huge for that age to be 88.
It's a big one.
Okay. Yeah.
I guess it's C.
Okay.
Oh, aim.
Okay. Yeah.
That what he was saying.
Without Jesus there running, I don't think I'd be interested.
All righty. I shall begin again. And I did put the website address for that Wave tool that I mentioned up. If you go to this wave.webaim.org page, there will be links at the bottom to get to the extension in the toolbar. So I think what we'll do now is jump over into Moodle. And let's see, I better close my browser that I had all that stuff open in. Nope.
Yay.
So the page that I ran across, and this is in this class assignments and objectives table for week 1. And I'm looking at, I'm pretty sure I'm in the student view. Let me double check. Does it tell me down at the bottom?
All those blue hidden from students tells me you're not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then
you're not
I
in
will,
Profile.
I will do that. Actually, let's stay here because I want to be sure it's showing me testable stuff. So this, I think it's pretty clear actually as a data table, right? Because we have 3 defined columns, we have objective, activities, points possible, and we have data under each one of those headers that aligns with the header, right? So this is a data table. Again, I'm logged in here, and I'm just going to run Wave over this, and I'm not going to worry about the stuff that it shows me in the header or in the sidebar right now. I'm just going to focus on the content because I'm thinking that if I'm you, I might tell somebody that there's like something in a template or a design that Wave flags, but I'm worried about my stuff. This kind of gets to your question about what do I do with this information when Wave tells me something's wrong? So I'm going to hit this little button again. And a few things. So again, we have this little blue fake table thing that tells me, it's not gonna let me click on it. If you cannot click on one of the icons in the content of the page, if you come over to the left sidebar, click on the little flag, it will show you all of the errors and all of the icons. And down here, I've got 2 layout tables. So it looks like I actually have 2 tables here. Nope, one is up at the top, and then down at the bottom, there's something in a table. So that's an issue for me. This is not actually built like a data table. This is just an information holder. So do you remember what the issue is with this if someone is using a screen reader?
It's just going to read it left to right, top to bottom.
Yeah, they're not going to have any way of hearing a reminder about what piece of information they're on. So if they get down to 1.5 or this data cell that's down lower, there's no way to easily get a reminder of what column they're actually in. Whereas visibly, we can just look. If someone's using a reader the way this is set up, that's not going to happen. This is interesting too. So it has this little H4 by each one of these. That means that these are actually headings. There's a difference. There's an important wording difference there. There's a heading, which is for section and subsection headings. And then there's a header, which is a table header. So if you hear accessibility geeks talk about this stuff, if they talk about headings, hopefully they're talking about headings in content, section and subsection. Headers, tables. Okay. And so in this case, I would say that there's really no reason for those to be headings, but they should be headers, right? So now you all can tell me how to fix this. I'm going to close Wave out. And is this my edit?
Mm-hmm. Edit.
Let's see what we can see. One of the things that I would suggest with tables, especially when this is actually a data table, we have data in this, that top week 1 note, in my view, shouldn't be in the table. It's not tabular data. If anything, it's a section heading with some extra information. It could in and of itself be week 1 as a first level heading, and then assignments due Sunday midnight, et cetera, as an H2. But I would remove that from the table content first. Does that make sense? Anybody wondering why?
I've also heard that you should never merge cells like that because that's cell 1.
Right.
And so that's cell 2 should be whatever's to the right of that, and there's nothing. So that would really mess up screen reader.
Yeah, you know, I don't know. Honestly, that's a lot of the guidance. I'm certainly not going to disagree with it. I think you can get away with it at times. In a situation like this, this isn't tabular data. It just doesn't. It shouldn't be in the table. So it's in my mind, being the accessibility geek, I think it's clear cut that should be outside of the table structure completely.
So just put it above the table.
Yep, just put it above. Let's see. We'll test my copy and paste abilities. Control Z, everybody. Love Control Z. So let's see how easy it is to. I don't want to delete the table.
Yeah, tables in Moodle are
Oh, you
such
can
a
delete
headache.
row.
Yep, delete row. And then we were talking about the styles. Let's see what this is. This is a heading 3. This is all heading 3. I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily make this heading text. But we're kind of getting in at this point to where we could probably nitpick this for 45 minutes. So instead of having a really pedantic semantic argument,
Well,
we can though.
yeah, my big question though is how do you change this from a layout table to a data table?
That's what I'm getting to.
Okay.
So we'll get back to that. So now we actually have the table to where at least that piece of information that's not data is out of it, right? So now we're going to try to answer your question. I don't know that I know either. The idea is that with these 3 cells, what I want to do is convert them from table data cells to table header cells.
Oh, you might have to do that in the table properties.
Yeah, I'm going to right click and look for table. Well, let's see. Row.
Yeah.
Convert the table from what to what?
Yeah.
It would be.
Say that again.
We want to convert the cells from data to header.
Data,
Ah.
header.
So that's why
Header, not header.
How did you get that screen? 5 rows down.
I guessed to go like fundamentally, how did I get it? I tried something and I think it worked. I highlighted the cells and I did a right click, which usually Shift F10 will get you your menu. Nope. We're just going to go with right click.
Okay, right.
So right click and then I selected table properties.
Okay.
Now we're going to look at the table properties and we've got, yeah, I'm just looking to see what all we have here. This is all about
What would class be?
dimensions.
Yeah.
Could be. No,
No?
hopefully not.
You have to set the class on your.
Now I'm in the advanced tab. I don't need IDs. Summary, language, background. No, that's right. Column padding alignment. Table caption. Oh, silly Moodle.
I wonder if you did it by cell, if it would show, because
Let's try that.
sometimes
Yeah.
in tables it does that. I don't
Yep.
know why.
No, that's a good idea.
And then, yeah, from cell,
Is there a
and
cell?
then go to table properties.
Table cell
Mhm.
properties?
Maybe. Who knows?
With class cell type.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to try one other thing. Everybody turn around, ignore me, pay no attention to the man behind. Yeah. So I selected all 3 of these.
Okay.
Because what I want to do, so all of these cells are table header cells, and they all only apply to one column. So what I'm trying to do is a shortcut. Instead of going cell by cell, what I'm trying out here is to see if I can change the properties for each cell all at one time. That's why I selected all 3 and then went to cell, table cell properties.
Yeah.
Okay. And this looks like it's what I want because I've got this cell type drop down over here that says data. I'm going to convert that to header. The other thing that is nice to set is the scope. If I hit this drop down, it gives me an option of column, row, and then some other stuff. This is a really simple table, and these are headers for columns or rows. For columns, right? So I'm going to select column here. So if I have row headers, so if I have a column off to the left with headers for each row, I would still identify those as table header cells, but I would select row for the scope. Does that make sense? So you're saying the type of cell, data or header, and then you're specifying, is it for a column or is it for a row?
So it's the thing that they refer back to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if it's at the top of the table and it's over a column, then you're going to set your scope to column. If it's off to the, generally it's off to the left side and it applies to a row, you're going to select row for your scope. Now I'm going to hit update. Have this little annoying layout thing because it recognizes that all of that markup is there. So what we did, somebody mentioned just go change it in HTML. We changed the HTML, we just had to go through submenus to do it. So we define these properties and now we have an accessible table.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
And it's not for you, it's for my understanding at the for the university. So yes, the Faculty Resource Center, they would be teaching faculty or having it on a faculty resource website to help faculty create their courses.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. They'll never, yeah.
Yes.
Is there a way to add back in the borders? Because just visually, that seems more difficult.
Yeah, there should be board. I don't remember if there were before.
That's the fault of tables in Moodle. Whenever you go in and change anything, it's like you have to reset everything else. Yeah. So,
Okay.
But yeah.
You can change fonts and stuff though, and space, put spaces in between it, right?
You can do whatever you want. Yeah. I'm just here to talk about accessibility. Y'all can do whatever you want.
Because I did.
Yeah.
And part of this too, the scaling is a little different because of the size of my screen and projection and all that stuff. If you look at it on your monitor on your desk, it might look better, but it is scaled a little bit, spaced a little bit oddly. So we answered that question, right? We can create an accessible table natively in Moodle. Yay.
That's good.
Let's see here. Or do you know if how many of you all know this content really well? Is there anything with an image in it?
Is there one at the top of this one? I don't remember.
Well, there's one right there.
My table.
You guys
At the
do.
very top of the course.
I'm looking in the content because is this over here all the time?
No,
Yeah, all the time.
if you go to the home page of this course, yeah.
Very top of
There
that.
you go.
Right there.
To the top there. Yeah.
Thanks. Now it says Alt Center Logo. Well, what do you think? Is that enough?
I might say SNU logo or Faculty Resource Center logo.
Yeah, I'd go for, I might jam it all in there. SNU Faculty Resource Center. You could probably get away with Faculty Resource
Oh,
Center.
wait a minute. But it looks like it is Faculty Resource.
Oh, I see.
Center.
Yeah, you're right. Faculty Resource Center. Yeah, I just hacked it up. Good eye.
So is that sufficient for that?
I would throw SNU in there since it's in the image. This is a lot of the nitpicky stuff that I get to do is like, I would do that, but you could also do that.
So how do you correct that?
Well, let's find out. Which is my way of saying I have absolutely no idea, but I'm willing to see if I can figure it out.
So you got an image.
How do I, do you want
Yeah.
up
the
here?
gear icon. Mhm. Turn
Okay.
editing on. There you go.
Okay. It's thinking about it.
Yeah.
And then it's going to get back to us.
And then that other on the right side. Yeah. You got it.
So here's the image. It's in a table for layout. I'm not going to sweat that. I mean, I will say ideally you don't use tables for layout if you can avoid it, but I don't know what Moodle can do with layout. It might stink. So I don't fail stuff like this when I do accessibility checks. I don't say, oh, layout table, fail. I usually recommend as a best practice not to do it, but it depends on the authoring environment. And if it's
Would
just a
you use
pain.
columns instead.
You can align your image, which would be better. Tell you to change the alignment of the image to like right.
Oh, I
left,
see. Yeah.
Or middle and
Yeah.
whatever. And then your text will still wrap around it. So you can get away with that.
I'm going to select insert/edit image, and we're going to see what attributes we have. Image description, yep. So it's not labeled, the field is labeled image description. It's not labeled alternative text, but that's what it's doing. It's taking whatever you type in here, and it's populating the little alt text attribute behind the screen. So be sure that in this image description, that's where you type in, it's actually probably a better description of the notion. It's a description of the image. I will say when you write alternative text, it's not always a description. You know, it just depends on the intended meaning of the image. So the example I give all the time is I have a nice picture of a scissortail flycatcher that unfortunately I didn't take, but it's a neat picture. And depending on the context that I use that, my alt text might be different. So if I'm writing a quick article about state symbols, what's significant about the scissortail here?
State bird.
Thank you. It's a state bird of Oklahoma, right? So my alternative text might be scissortail flycatcher, state bird of Oklahoma. If I'm writing for a bird watching magazine, it's going to be totally different. And I'm not a bird watcher, so I don't want to make anything up. So there is some thought. It's just like if you type up content in general, if you include an image, you probably have an idea of what meaning you want it to convey. So type that up, tuck it in here.
Oh, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for like my sociology faculty, they have lots of very, graphs with lots of information. Well, oftentimes that information is explained in a paragraph within the text.
Yeah.
Is it appropriate to go and do alternate text and say, this is a graph, please refer to the heading or?
Yeah, I would just say in that description, say description following, description previous, something like that. Make it short and sweet and to the point. But if the text equivalent is already there, yeah, just refer to it in this attribute.
Any Are there any art faculty in here? Yeah. Okay, so I have had issues with art tests.
Oh yeah.
Can't put all the
You
text
can't
in
give
there,
away
tell
the
them
answer.
what the picture is, and they have to identify the picture. So
Right.
that's a good example of what you're saying. Depends on how you describe it. If you're
Yep.
going to describe it,
You might be giving away an answer.
screen reader, you
Yeah.
might say that it's a blue, whatever, but not give away that it's from Picasso.
Right.
Yeah, that's where it gets.
Yeah.
Anyway, just so you know, you don't want to put that off text.
And that would be the description that you would use in class too, like when you're describing the image
Right.
to the students, say, this is a castle that has a blue lake underneath it.
Right.
And for complex images, those are the ones that take a longer narrative to describe. And that's what you described is exactly what I suggest. You know, if you have an image that's really complex and you end up typing a paragraph, I would say don't put it in that description, because at some point, someone who can see is going to benefit from that narrative description, right? People interpret information differently, different modalities of presentation are helpful. So if you have the picture that is worth 1,000 words, I always suggest to try to find a way to put that description just in the content and then do what we discussed. Refer people to it in the text equivalent so that they know, or in the image description, so they know that there's an image here, that's great, and the description is wherever you point them to. With research stuff, with funded work, sometimes you might have a page limit and you can't fit it in, and that's usually where I suggest we'll put it into an appendix. I've seen people abuse appendices far worse than what I'm suggesting to you now by suggesting you put your longer narrative into an appendix somewhere, and then your image description just says long description is in appendix whatever. Yes.
Run into two problems with a blind student in my class last semester. One of them was I used other people's web pages on the internet, and often would project them and talk through them with students, like examples of inductive and deductive reasoning.
Right.
If I provide her with the link, I still can't do any modification of the other person's web page in order to make it so she had the little reader like.
Yep.
And then the other thing that happens is if you have student presentations, like PowerPoint presentations, they're not labeling things in the way that you describe. So do you have any suggestions?
On the first point, the only guidance I can give you is that even though it's third-party content, the royal you still own the decision to use it. So there are lots of ways to try to either impose upon whoever has created that content to make it more accessible or to find alternatives. I suppose that an individual accommodation could work, but in terms of timeliness, that's usually not possible. So it's difficult to give really strict guidance on that. We have started to see, though, until the current administration, where they're actually pulling back a little bit, frankly, on enforcement within the Office of Civil Rights in the Department of Justice or the Department of Education. Prior to that, we had begun to see explicitly mentioned in settlement agreements and such, third-party content that you link to. So not even third-party tools that you buy, but third-party content that you link to. I'm not going to say right now that anybody's going to get dinged for it. I think it's an important consideration just in terms of the student experience. So I think it's a good thing to consider and discuss on campus. How can we approach this? Because it is tricky, and it depends on your source. I mean, some folks, you might shoot them an email, say, hey, this is great stuff. I really want to use it in my class. I've already had a student who's blind and uses a screen reader. What do you know about accessibility? Because sometimes people will go, I've never thought about that, and they'll start working to improve it. Sometimes they won't send you an email back, but sometimes they will. And then the second point, remind me, because
presentations.
Oh yes,
my other students.
I think there's a great educational opportunity, because one of the points that I make, which you've very generously given me the opportunity to make here, is that this stuff isn't taught, and that's a problem. It's a problem for instructional design students. It's a problem for students who are going to be instructors because you're creating your own stuff. It's a problem for anybody in any tech adjacent field. It's not commonly taught. I think you could start hitting on some of the easy things, right? I mean, I really would encourage you to consider, if you are teaching people more about how to use the presentation tools, work in a bit about alt text. You know, work in some of the kind of easy things. You know, so it's not let's take 2 class periods to instruct students to the nth degree about how to make an accessible presentation, but especially with presentations, things like color contrast are hugely important. And like I said, I can't tell you how many presentations I've seen, even at disability-related conferences, where there's light gray text on a white background. And then the presenter's like, well, I'm sorry that doesn't show up very well. And I'm sorry if any of you have said that, I just offended you. But if you have to say that, then you're not using high enough contrast in your slide deck, right? And it's just, that's an objective statement of fact. Now, sometimes the projectors are so bad that black and white doesn't show up. And we've all been there. And then you just get to verbally read every slide, every word on every slide. But a lot of the times it's because we're not paying attention to contrast. So I think that you could also, you know, appeal to a desire for higher quality output and cover some of the basics without blowing your class up. And also work on describing things during the presentation and repeating questions if you can, and especially in a big setting, because the audio is always bad somewhere. Good questions. What else? Those are the 2 things I kind of wanted to see what Moodle could do. Did anything jump out as I was talking about testing? Because we know we can do heading styles.
A lot of times we do sections like week 1, week 2. So how important is it to make sure those are headings? Because again, I guess the screen reader wouldn't know where to take the student.
Yeah, it's really important to make sure that the heading structure is built into those. So if it's section 1 with a date, whatever that text is that you type and, you know, bold and maybe change the color for, apply a heading to it. The thing with heading levels, and so headings, and you can see here, so I've clicked over to Welcome SNU WC 1001, and over in this little drop down, this is where I can see the style that's applied. I'm going to see how many levels down I go. Heading 1 all the way down to heading 6. With headings, you're not counting the headings on the page. So it's not an incremental count of headings. It defines the structure of the content. So you'll have on most pages 1 heading level 1, and then all the subsections under that will be heading 2 or lower. So you'll have like a heading section, a heading level 2. You might have immediately after that another subsection, but it's actually just a subsection of this first heading. Does that make sense? So it's very hierarchical. And that's what you're going for with heading structure, is you're defining the logical structure of the content. And you kind of probably do it already, but you might just do it visibly, right? So you might, again, make the first level heading bigger and more bold, and then you'll have subsection headings that you make a little bit smaller but still bolded, and then you might go 3 layers in and you might just bold and underline that. Well, those are all just logical demarcations. And so the only thing to change is to use these heading styles instead of just making the visible change.
Go back to the front page and talk through that briefly one more time when there's how that might look. I don't remember what's on the front.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Scroll down a bit to save.
So let me jump in. What's a good example?
Like I think week 1 is down there if you keep going. That's the week 1 topic title. And then there's like assignments under that.
Oh, so with these?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So we've got week 1 assignments, week 1 additional resources.
So what headings would you apply to those?
Let's see here. Let's see how it's set up and how many layers deep it might be. It's considering running the test. Oh, no, it's Friday afternoon. I don't really know if I'm going to do this right now. Now I can look at it. I can look at it another way if it'll come back to life here. One of the things to think about that kind of makes this answer maybe not more complex, but a little bit more nuanced. A lot of the time, woo, they have all kinds of fun stuff going on. Look at that. Yeah, I went back to the regular view. I am going to do this.
Thinking that you could click to turn off some of the things that it's showing.
I don't think.
shows 20% of the photos. No.
So the way this is styled and bolded, it's actually only a visible change. There is an attribute that separates it from regular text. What I'm looking at is there's this strong, no, it's in an H3. It's up here. So those are in third level headings. So this is a third, this might be in a second. Yeah, I hit inspect. Yeah, and that's the thing. Again, running this on your machine with more real estate is going to look a lot differently. It's jamming all this stuff into my screen going to the projector.
Now that date is automated through Moodle. No one entered that, so Moodle's making that.
It's doing that automatically.
Okay, that's good.
And that's kind of that's what I was going to say, is that a lot of the times the platforms, depending on the kind of content you enter, automatically apply things like heading levels. And so with these, like with week 1, is that something that you all style? Well, here, let's find out.
Yeah.
Oh,
this was a template that we put headings into.
Okay.
I'm crossing my fingers that they're there, of course.
Yeah, this one was in a heading. Let's see with assignments. It could be a 3.
I don't know that they're numbered the way they need to.
This looks like it's an H4. Which I honestly think you can make the case, well, because this is week 1 title, and then you've got week 1 assignments as a subheading. This is probably the same subheading, right? So this would be a 4 as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, those are H4s.
But could each new week start at heading 1 if you wanted to, and then everything under that is 2?
No, I wouldn't, because really there should be, and this is a rule of thumb, there should be one heading 1 on each page.
Okay.
And that's not a hard and fast standard, but that's for the web a best practice. With your non-web stuff, you can have multiple H1s, because if you have a big old long report, you might have several main sections, and each one of those will have a first level heading associated. But on the web, typically you'll just see 1 per page, and then everything else will fall in under that.
Who is creating? Are every faculty creating their course, or is
it's different for everybody?
They come to us.
Templates and some faculty that do it themselves.
If they come to us, we give them something similar to this, where we have the headings built into it. So that would already be there. They would just go in and say whatever the topic was, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So we try to provide some of that.
So my next question are, what are the recent court rulings on responsibility for, like, if
it's an institutional responsibility.
Institutional. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you might have individual departments or products named in a complaint, but it's the institution's responsibility. And most institutions then, you know, by policy kind of define that internally. Okay, we've got 25 minutes left, and I'd be happy to jump into some non-web stuff, unless you have other questions about web stuff, which I'm happy to entertain as well. To choose your own adventure.
What were the choices? I'm sorry.
We can keep talking about web stuff, or we can move to like PDF.
Let's move to PDF.
Yeah, PDF.
That's more practical.
I'm a math professor. I'm making a lot of PDFs. So I'd be interested to hear what you have to say.
I would suggest a different authoring environment for your equations.
Okay.
PDF doesn't. So with equations in PDF, to cut right to the chase,
yeah,
they are converted into images.
Okay.
Which stinks, because stinks for you, because theoretically you got to type in a narrative verbatim reading of each equation.
Okay.
Stinks for the student, because if the student can see, they can read through a variable at a time.
Yeah.
Right. If they're just having a narrative read from a reader, it's completely different. Yeah, so PDF honestly is not yet very good at publishing math. They're working on it.
Okay.
But right now it's not there yet.
So what are you using
Well,
natively to create the PDF?
I'm using LaTeX.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would stick with that, because
On the toolbar, I think you can use
LaTeX. I've
it's
done
just
that.
harder in Moodle.
Yeah.
because LaTeX is generally, it usually ends up published in a pretty accessible format. I don't know what Moodle does with it exactly.
Okay.
But I would stick with the native authoring.
All right.
And then there's some stuff on the disability services side in terms of consuming that.
Yeah.
Like I know Daisy, is it Daisy Reader? Some of the products do better reading math than others.
Okay.
But it's kind of a combination. It's from the authoring side and from the assistive technology side. But PDF just, it doesn't support it yet.
Okay.
They are working to support MathML, which is a standard for,
MathML,
they're working that way.
Okay.
I think it's a non-trivial thing. I think it's the problem is it's hard in PDF. It's amazing how many layers there are to a PDF document.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not there yet, but hopefully will be. But yeah, I think with LaTeX, you're in better shape from accessibility side, going with that natively.
Okay.
So I mentioned PDF. Everybody wants to do PDF. I actually want to start with Google because how you don't often go in and just start editing a PDF, right?
Right.
From scratch.
Depends on what you're using to create the PDF. You don't use.
Yeah, I mean, typically people don't use. Yeah, you don't use Acrobat Pro to create something from scratch. Typically.
As a PDF or saving as a PDF from somewhere else.
Yeah, usually, but I do a little editing anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you'll end up kind of in the same place. That can be the next session. It can be all about PDF. You think you're sleepy now, we get into PDF stuff. I don't have enough jokes to make that really entertaining. There are just some things you can't get around. So I'm going to jump into Google Docs real fast. Oh, let's see. I bet I can. Yeah, that's okay.
I messed you up.
Well, I bet I can get to it just from the link that you sent me earlier. Don't read my email. Don't read my. No, it's fine. I think. Is anybody yelling at me in email? Okay, good. Rob, you're a horrible person. Stop berating me about this. I don't care. Just leave me alone. Let me do my job.
While you're looking, I was in a webinar yesterday and somebody was sharing their screen and I kept seeing Facebook post, notifications pop up.
You gotta turn that stuff off.
And I keep seeing so-and-so also commented on that photo on Facebook.
Is it the SMU faculty guide?
That's what I'm trying
It's at
to.
the
Is it
top
this
of
one?
this email. Yeah, I saw it at the very first page.
Faculty resource guide. This one, Gen Eds.
Well, that's another one. You can use that one.
Okay, let's see what happens.
Distracted by your Facebook notification.
Oh, it opened it in Firefox. Go away, Firefox. No, I can.
There you go.
And then hit him up in the chat. Hey, did you see my friend request? Go for full embarrassment. There is a plugin that actually this afternoon made me go out and download and play with a little bit, and it's pretty good. It's not amazing, but it's pretty good. It's called Grackle Docs. It's a plugin for docs. I think there's a version for slides and for sheets that does accessibility checking.
How do you
And
spell that?
Grackle, Grackle, and Docs, just like Google Docs. It's just an extension. They haven't sent me a bill yet, so I think it's free. Let's see if. Oh, I'm logged out. It's not going to be on here. That's okay. Because we can do some testing for things like color, and we can see how these things are structured just by clicking into them. So I'm looking at SNU Online Faculty Guide, and I'm thinking, in my mind, that's probably the heading 1 for the page. Does that make sense logically, just based on what we can see so far? So the styles are defined up here. This little drop down, you run the mouse over it, it says styles. I'm going to click into this first line, and it just says normal text, which tells me that it's just been bolded and the color's been changed. So this is where we should change it to a heading 1. And the nice thing about it is that, let's see, I think it's under format. Because what I actually want to do, I don't want to change it visibly, right? We like the visible look of the font. We like the size and the color and all that stuff. So when I go into this format paragraph styles and I select heading 1, the options the flyout gives me are apply heading 1, which would just make this into a heading 1, but it would change it visibly to whatever's defined in the doc, or update heading 1 to match. which means take the way this thing looks and make that the heading 1 style. So without changing the look or feel of the document, can I do this or should I not?
Do it, please.
You're logged in. You're logged in.
To, so.
Update heading 1 to match. Visibly, nothing changed, that was our goal. Except if you look up here now to heading 1, it has that heading 1 style apply. If you dump this out to a PDF, that's going to go along with the document into the PDF.
Okay.
So to address PDF accessibility, I always go back to the source. So if you're in Office, if you're in Google Suite, if you do design work, try to address as much as you can in the authoring tool instead of in Acrobat. There might be some stuff you got to fix in Acrobat. Like I said, it's a longer talk. And Acrobat accessibility, there's just more to it. It's a lot easier in most authoring environments to do it here. So what's another consideration with that SNU online faculty guide text that you can think of that I think is going to be okay, but I'm going to be nitpicky and check it anyway? Contrast, right? Thank you. Everybody gets a cookie, which I didn't provide, but they're over there, so you can have one. This is another tool that I can email. And Misty, I don't know if I've emailed you about this before, but, well, actually, let's see. I don't think they have. The Grackle Docs plugin does have a contrast checker.
Okay, I'll run it on it right now.
I don't believe, well, I'm going to show you another tool that you can use in anything, if it'll show up on my desktop. Oh, come on. Yeah, and I will, if I can get it to show up, it's not going to show up. Awesome. I will describe it because I've done this many times. It's called Color Contrast Analyzer, but it's like Australian spelling, Color Contrast Analyzer. It is a really small little app that you download, and it has 2 eyedroppers on it. One lets you select a foreground color. One lets you select a background color. Runs the same math that the Wave tool does. So it's really handy. In this, actually, let's see. I'm going to run Wave on this thing. I'm going to run Wave on a web app in an app. I heard you like apps, so see if it'll run. While that's trying to figure out what to do, the Color Contrast Analyzer is portable across any format. So if you do use Office for anything, you can test contrast in PowerPoint or Word or PDF. You can test contrast in just about anything you can get to show up on your screen. Let's see if this... That's pointing to stuff. See, that's pointing to stuff up here. I'm worried about content. I don't see anything.
Oh, no. All the cookies.
Did you run it? It's like 9 to 1. Is that what you said?
Well, it says down there contrast ratio.
Oh, yeah. This is looking at stuff that's defined in the actual app. So in Google Docs. I don't play in Google Land very much, so I don't get a chance to try to run Wave over it and see if it breaks. But you can quantify color contrast even in other authoring environments. Before you publish anything, as you're working on it, you can define this stuff up front and know if you're going to get yourself in a situation where you don't have high enough contrast. The nice thing about most of the authoring environments is that they automatically underline links. Looks like here we've got descriptive link text, which again is a manual thing to check. For consistency, I might suggest not underlining anything other than links, because that can be a little bit confusing. That's again a best practice suggestion, not a hard and fast accessibility thing. But if someone has a hard time distinguishing between the blue link text and black, if they kind of look the same, they're going to think those are links as well.
Oh, the reader will the reader interpret them?
Nope. But, like I said, there are a lot of visible sides to accessibility as well. And in this case, it's really more of a usability question in general, where you just don't want to confuse folks. You want to be consistent. And there is an accessibility component to that consistency of presenting content.
So best practices would be to say short how-to video URL link, and then next to it or underneath it, put www.
Yeah, I think so. Because again, I think even in docs, people are liable to print this stuff out. And that's what I'm thinking of. Is any format that's more likely to be printed, it's a good idea to make a note of that web address.
Instead of saying click here, just say link, that's the URL link.
No, I mean, you could say click here for a short video how-to and then just put the URL right next to it. I wouldn't, you don't necessarily need to edit anything.
I like watch this how.
Sure. Sure.
What about font? I know that there are two main fonts that screen readers read very well, but then some fonts.
Screen readers don't care about font because they're just looking at the text. Font choice is going to be for sighted readers, and there's not any hard and fast standard about what font to use. But again, there's research into more readable fonts, and there's also a lot of variation in what is helpful. So for people with some print disabilities, what I'm about to say actually makes it harder. So it does kind of depend a little bit. In general, the sans serif fonts, which are the ones like, Times New Roman, the T, if you have a capital T, has the little hooks on either side of the T and the little feet down at the bottom. That's a serif font because it has those little serifs. Arial, like we see here, is a sans serif font. It doesn't have those. And generally speaking, sans serif fonts are the way to go. Again, no hard and fast accessibility rule. That's just in looking at readability studies and things like that. You want to avoid all caps. I'm sorry.
On-screen reading as opposed to print reading.
Reading's reading, so it doesn't necessarily matter as far as the font styling goes.
For print reading, like reading books, serif fonts are easier.
See, this is why it's not codified into standards. And it could be the way that it's rendered on screen is different, but that's the thing. That's why I don't make too many. I'm gonna make a recommendation for a certain audience. Like there is a specific font that is more readable for folks that have dyslexia.
What is that?
I don't remember. Tamara probably knows.
It's not in the Word doc.
Yeah, it's something you have to go out and get.
But like the free screen reader that I provide as an accommodation to our students with learning disabilities doesn't read all fonts. Does it?
Well, it's not looking at the font though, it's looking at the HTML code, so it doesn't matter what font. What you might be thinking of is that it's not seeing that descriptive text in the HTML and things like that, but fonts, that's the thing about a screen reader, it's not looking at the appearance of text at all, right?
So like Dr. Neuenschwander has this book, and so we had to cut it up, convert it through Adobe Acrobat Pro.
Oh, okay.
And then all that funky font that.
So that would be an OCR.
Right.
What's that?
Optical character recognition.
Recognition. That's what it can't read through those fonts. Because it's trying to take an image of a page and recognize the text in there and then turn that into text.
Well, the reason I'm highlighting that is for our faculty, because when they do use stuff or print something and then we have to convert it, that's something to be aware of, for it's an accessibility issue.
Yeah. And when you get into alt format and scanning, there are things you can do in Acrobat where you can actually tell it, here's what this text actually is. So if it has a garbled scan and it can't do it, you can define actual text and the reader will look there. But that's again, kind of a separate topic because it brings in the whole optical character recognition piece.
And that's different than that.
Right. Right.
Can I do a little plug for fonts real quick?
Yeah.
Just because I know our web accessibility, our web, what is that, visual standards guide, Colleen Brown has recommended, or it actually our adopted sans serif font is Helvetica. And so you'll see that like that syllabus template that we give y'all, everything, we try to use Helvetica just because that's the SNU adopted. So if you want to be consistent with their visual standards, that's a sans serif. Yeah.
Is that in the email?
It's in the visual standards guide somewhere on our website. Anyway, while we're talking about fonts, if you're going to choose one, choose Helvetica just because it matches our web guide. It's nothing to do with accessibility.
Go ahead. So you were on avoid all caps.
Yeah, avoid all caps. changes the spacing in the words and the way that our brains interpret is not necessarily letter by letter, but it's by word shape. I mean, that's why speed readers are so quick, because they don't look at the letters. They just look at the shape of the words. And to some extent, most of our brains look at word shape to interpret. So when you do all caps, or if you do the fixed width, which I don't think anybody really uses, but if you make it look like a typewriter typed it out, that makes it more difficult. It just slows people down getting that information into their brains. Justified, yeah. Justified can be more difficult to read as well. And yet newspapers do it, and then they wonder why they're failing. Yeah. But that does, again, that might not necessarily make it so that someone cannot perceive that content, but it just introduces more overhead, right? Makes it harder to perceive the meaning if you're having to slow down a little bit to interpret the words into letters and sentences. We're very near the end of our time together. I want to see just what other questions you all have instead of diving too much deeper. Questions from Misty. Why did she bring me here today?
I use that title heading, title style.
Mm-hmm.
That's not recognized as a heading style.
It is not a heading style.
You know, I've been breaking the rules.
Yeah, so I'm glad that Google Docs is consistent along with Office on that, because Office is the same way. The title style is just there. It's not recognized yet by assistive technologies. I know in Office, do you all know where the title attribute is in Google Docs?
It was, yeah.
Paid document details? No.
When you were on the title earlier and looking for the head.